Truth, transparency, and the right of privacy. That's the subject of today's ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk.
Welcome to ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel, a professional society of peer-elected trust and estate lawyers in the United States and around the globe. This series offers professionals best practice advice, insights, and commentary on subjects that affect our profession and clients. And now, our ACTEC Fellow host with today's topic.
This is Susan Snyder, ACTEC Fellow from Chicago. Welcome to a special lecture series featuring Duncan Osborne, ACTEC Fellow from Austin, Texas. Duncan is a past president of ACTEC, and he presented the annual Trachtman lecture in front of a live audience at ACTEC's annual meeting in March of 2020. We have broken his 90-minute lecture, Truth, Transparency, and the Right of Privacy, into 3 episodes. In this first episode, he tells us a few stories and discusses what truth means to him. In part 2, he will talk about his experience with the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, and transparency within the law and government. And in the final part, Duncan will express his views on the attorney-client relationship and an individual's right to privacy. Now, ACTEC President Jack Terrell will introduce Duncan Osborne.
Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to be on the podium today to introduce the 2020 Joseph Trachtman Lecturer. In my almost 30 years as a fellow of ACTEC, I've attended probably a dozen or more Trachtman lectures, each of which has left a lasting impression with me, and I know with the others who have attended. I'm confident that today, with the great-great-grandson of Herman Melville, will be no exception. Our speaker today is someone well known to most of you. Duncan Elliott Osborne has been a fellow of the college since 1984, when he was a child. During those going on 40 years, he has served in many capacities. He chaired the International Estate Planning Committee. He chaired with distinction the FATF Task Force. He was a member of and involved with many aspects, committee aspects, in the life of the college, a frequent speaker. Duncan is prolific on the topics that interest him, one of which we'll hear about today. Duncan, and also a variety of international tax issues, in addition to asset protection planning and FATF. Duncan became an officer of the college in 2009 and was president during the 2013 and 14 college year. His involvement in the leadership of STEP, the International Academy, the ABA Real Property, Probate, and Trust Law section were and continue to be significant. He really is a man for all seasons. Duncan has been a close personal and professional friend to me. I view him as my mentor at ACTEC, and he honors me. I give you Duncan Osborne.
Goodness gracious, Jack. Back to the drawing board after that. Jack, before I begin, I have a couple of stories I want to share. They're stories about Texas lawyers, and they're favorite stories of mine, but to have them really make sense to you, I need to put them in a certain geographical context. When I was a little boy growing up in West Texas, my grandmother explained to me, she said, Duncan, it doesn't rain on the west side of the 100th meridian. And this was during the drought of the 50s, and it wasn't raining. And so the 100th meridian is, well, now I'm really messing up, is right on that, if you drop that line straight down on that north-south border with Oklahoma, it's more or less the 100th meridian. And this map doesn't show it very well, but it's much greener on the eastern 2/3 of that map than it is on the western 1/3. And so that's why all the people in the state live on the eastern side of the state, and that's why you have all the big cities over there, and that's why you have forests and flowers and gardens and landscaping. Over on the west side, The towns and the cities seem to be, or tend to be, challenged by dust, challenged by wind. Their streets are graced by tumbleweeds. If they have a tree, it's likely to be a mesquite. If they have a flower, it's likely to be a bloom on a prickly pear cactus. There are two cities in particular you can see on that western one-third, Midland and Odessa. Midland and Odessa are there really for just one purpose, to serve a great underground sea of oil called the Permian Basin. And so in Midland, you have all the fat cats. You have the men and women who make the big deals, who make the big bucks, who lose the big bucks, and they're there with their lawyers and their bankers and their accountants and their investment bankers. Odessa, on the other hand, is the blue-collar town. The people that live there do the heavy lifting, the roustabouts and the roughnecks and the pumpers and the welders and the truck drivers. And as you can imagine, there's a fair amount of rivalry between these two cities. The first story I want to tell is about a lawyer from Midland, a man by the name of Robert Bledsoe. There is a law firm in Midland called Cotton, Bledsoe, Teague, and Dawson. And it is the premier, or one of the premier, oil and gas firms in the state. Robert Bledsoe was one of the founding partners of that firm, and he was honored last year for his service to the industry, for his service to his profession, for his service to his community. He's now probably in his close to 90, if he's not 90, but truly a wonderful man and a great lawyer. But they asked him to say a few words on the occasion of his being honored. So he gets up there and he says, well, I grew up in Marfa, and Marfa is sort of down there a little bit east of Fort Stockton, and it's a dusty little West Texas town. And he said, growing up, we were dirt poor. We didn't have anything. But we didn't know we didn't have anything because nobody else had anything either. But one day, our neighbor across the street came home with a brand new black Chevrolet. I was 6, 7 years old, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And I went home and I said, Daddy, we got to have ourselves a black Chevrolet. And my daddy said, Bobby, we don't have that kind of money. We can't afford a new black Chevrolet. We can't afford a new automobile at all. Well, that just about broke my heart. I stewed on it for a couple of days, and then one night, right after dark, I strapped on my 6-shooter, my cap gun. I stole a 10-penny nail from my daddy's workbench. I went across the street, and right underneath the window on the driver's side on that brand new black paint job, I wrote, Bobby Bledsoe. My daddy and I were talking about that years later, and he said, Bobby, I could hardly keep from laughing while I was whipping you. Particularly when you looked up at me with tears running down your face and said, Daddy, how did they know it was me? My other story is about a plaintiff's lawyer from Odessa, a man who grew up in Odessa, and he was a trial lawyer and one of the best ever. His name was Warren Burnett, and he was gifted. He was magical with juries. And with excuses and pardons to people like Larry Ottaway, some of my plaintiff's friends have had challenges with the bottle and challenges with women. And Warren Burnett fit into that category. But he had a yellow lab that went with him everywhere, a big yellow lab that rode shotgun everywhere he went. And he's speeding across West Texas one of these afternoons, and he gets pulled over. But before the cop can get to the window, he switches places with the dog. The cop gets to the window, and as you can imagine, he's thunderstruck. He's speechless. He can't think of anything to say. And Warren Burnett's got this gravelly voice. He leans over there and said, Officer, I'm so glad you stopped us. I've been trying to get him to slow down. I think the dog got a warning. When Jack Terrell asked me to give the Trachtman lecture, the first thing I did was consult with my wife, Betty. Many of you know Betty and know her to be a woman of strong opinions. She offered the following advice: talk about something everyone in the audience understands, keep it short, and don't talk about yourself. I expect there's going to be hell to pay. This is a recounting of a personal odyssey. It is my own deep dive into the right of privacy and into the consequences of available information and transparency in the world in which we find ourselves today. Appropriately enough, this journey was launched by work I was asked to do for the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel. Before I share with you the actual origins of this trip, I want to say a word about truth, because my preoccupation with privacy was initially inspired by my obsession with the truth. Truth is at the heart of this journey, and in our world today, the whole concept of what constitutes truth seems to be under assault. The facility and irresponsibility with which facts are distorted and fabricated is reaching unprecedented levels. Perhaps the most ongoing and visible violators of the truth are politicians. But abuse of the facts in our society is pervasive, and this problem is not limited to the political sphere. We have seen information manipulated, hidden, and distorted by the media, by the church, by academics, etc. The list goes on. The result is an environment in which individuals no longer trust expertise or our institutions. I submit that this is ultimately a threat to our democratic processes. The departure from the truth, from reality, inevitably leads to wrong-headed decisions and conclusions. How can we possibly organize as a society, resolve differences, and work towards a better future if we cannot even agree on simple reality? Actions based on false information are not only irresponsible, but potentially dangerous. As lawyers, this development is particularly troubling, especially when you consider our calling. What is our role here? I submit to you that lawyers are the ultimate guardians of the truth. I repeat, lawyers are the ultimate guardians of the truth. What is the very first lesson that we learned in law school and what was drummed into our heads for the next 3 years? Facts. What are the facts of the case? Case law starts with facts. It depends on truth. And when first asked to brief a case, the professor wanted you to begin by reciting what happened. Not only did the truth dominate every case you ever read or briefed, we learned that there were very strict rules to ensure that the truth was not perverted, distorted, or fabricated. That's why we learned the rules of evidence. That's why we learned the rules of procedure. That's why virtually every case at its essence originates with finding of facts before you get to the conclusions of law. As lawyers, truth is part of the essence of our profession. Our profession is an honorable one, but with honor and stature comes responsibility. I do believe that the rule of law still carries weight. And perhaps more than ever today, one of the most important burdens we bear is unequivocal commitments to the truth and to the rule of law. We cannot stand by and let policymakers act on fictional facts or let waves of misinformation and disinformation drive deeper wedges into our already fractured society. We will have opportunities from time to time, and we can question assertions when these opportunities arise. When these opportunities do arise, we should make our voices heard. And with emphasis, we should always stand for and defend the truth and the rule of law. This responsibility to the truth brings to the fore the issue of transparency. Indeed, is not transparency the handmaiden of truth? Does not transparency always serve to shine a bright light on the facts? Transparency has its place, but it should also have its limits. And I've come to believe that for ensuring the truth, perhaps the protection of privacy is every bit as important as the role of transparency.
This concludes part 1 of 3 in our special ACTEC lecture, Truth, Transparency, and the Right of Privacy. Please join us for the next episode in the series, which will discuss Duncan's experience with the FATF, or Financial Action Task Force, and transparency within the law and government. Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk, the podcast series about wealth planning matters from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel. To find an ACTEC lawyer near you, visit actec.org. Please subscribe to this series and leave us a rating or a review. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at ACTEC Talk.